Well, this episode, this one came in hot and heavy as there was a bunch of breaking news in the last, basically right before we're recording all of this. Welcome all into the unofficial WCC Hoops podcast. I'm Zach Farmer alongside Thomas Dunn. And yes, we are going to preview San Diego. We are going to preview Seattle in this episode. But we've got to start with the breaking news that happened on Monday and was made official on Tuesday, and that is the WCC will be adding UC San Diego to its roster as a full member starting the 2027-28 season. So in 3 seasons from now, we will see the Tritons join the West Coast Conference. This is a team that won its conference tournament, made the NCAA tournament this past year in its first year of eligibility. Its women's program also did the same, winning its tournament and reaching the NCAA tournament for the first time in its school's history. This is a program that is quickly on the rise in Division One, and the WCC, to me, feels like they did the thing they needed to do and jumped on a really good opportunity quickly.
And despite being the unofficial WCC Hoops podcast, it's my honor to welcome UC San Diego into the WCC. But I think it's a really net positive move across the board. I don't think you can slice it any way but that. You think of the way that both basketball programs made the NCAA tournament. The men's team, pretty much a great chance to beat Michigan. Unfortunately, couldn't get it done. But I just think in general of the trajectory of what the athletic programs have been on, I think you can't say anything but that it's a positive. The Chancellor mentioned in the press conference 20 of 24 teams made postseason tournaments in their respective sports. And I think when you consider the footprint of San Diego and USD and kind of that little local rivalry, kind of like LMU and Pepperdine in a certain sense, San Francisco, Santa Clara in a certain sense, like two teams now that can butt heads in the same region. And I think it's really good, really neat. And I think it's something that is going to be well versed in terms of what the effects are, even though it does change the ethos of the conference, because this is now a first permanent member that is a public school as opposed to the affiliates that were Oregon State and Washington State.
And these conversations started about 9 months ago, and really kind of to that point, there was a lot of questions, a lot of talk about the fact that, yes, we have a public school now being a full member inside of this league. The WCC has had some experience the last couple of years with 2 publics as affiliates, Washington State and Oregon State. And it does seem like that made this sell easier for the rest of the WCC and the President's Council to say that, yes, we can do a public school, but also the idea of public versus private was kind of de-emphasized in the press conference, because at the bottom line, and it is true that it's about what's happening on the court, on the field, on the pitch. It's about what's happening out there in the competition. And we can talk about resources. We can talk about just like the size of your facilities or whatever else. But the bottom line is, like, how successful are you on the field? And we know that WCC teams across all their sports have been very successful on the national stage, multiple national championships. We can kind of go through all of those sorts of things. But this is a UC San Diego program that it really looked at this as being a basketball first move. That's really what it sounded like to me, as Chancellor Kozla kind of talked about why this was the right time for this move. And the WCC has been very clear. This is a basketball first conference, and that is what we have seen with this move. You add this now to a roster of 10 schools: St. Mary's, USF, Santa Clara, LMU, Pepperdine, Portland, Pacific, Seattle, San Diego. You add UC San Diego into that mix. This is a league that is getting a little deeper. Yes, you're going to lose Gonzaga, you lose Washington State, Oregon State, but this was a great first step in my mind toward really kind of not necessarily re-legitimizing, but making sure that the ship isn't going to sink once Gonzaga and the other 2 public schools do leave.
And a part of the deal is Commissioner Jackson has been very consistent in his messaging that the conference is not going to add just for the sake of adding. It can't just be an arms race like that where it ends up being a performative relationship and you think of it like that. We got to get numbers, numbers, numbers. It need to be a vetting process that was worth a salt. And I do believe it was worthy of a team and programs like UC San Diego. And you considered the inevitable questions. Who else is going to come along for the ride? They placed a to be determined timeline on that, but they said the President's Council ideally would like potentially 2 more teams down the line on that. But I think in general, when you take a step back, you're like, okay, what does UC San Diego bring to the table? They bring a nice market alongside UCSD. They bring ascending athletic programs that have made their business known across several different sports. And the one thing that stood out to me, at least, and for me, it was the athletic environment. UC San Diego, for those of you who are unaware, if you go back and try and find and read stories of last year's road game at UC Irvine, they brought like 300 students. Like the energy on campus is driven towards athletics now. Then that is something I think when you think of UC schools, that is something that has not happened in a long time. Like Prime Cal in the 2000s, UCLA at different times and with basketball. Sometimes athletics is a hard wall to break through in terms of spirit on UC campuses. But UC San Diego, over the course of the last 2 seasons, I have noticed it tenfold that people care about athletics down there. And both the chancellor and the athletic director were very consistent that it's part of the experience, not only for student athletes, but for students around campus in general. And I think they realize that going into the WCC, it's a net positive move for their brand, their footing, what they're trying to accomplish. And I think it's a well-earned fit across the board, especially when you consider like the external elements, like the branding and spirit.
And Chancellor Kozla kind of talked about the idea of like the moving to the WCC is an opportunity to increase in there. I think it was their thought share about where UCSD is in the national landscape, not just the local landscape, because within the Big West, even though you can kind of make the case that it fits more as far as like the types of schools they are, the missions and all that sort of stuff. Obviously, a lot of UC's state schools make up the Big West. But at the same time, the WCC is a more recognized and respected conference across the country. Everyone knows about, obviously, Gonzaga, St. Mary's, and there's, I think, increasingly more respect for USF, for Santa Clara, for the likes of Seattle that is joining this year. There is some depth and realizing that the talent is in the WCC. I mean, you can look at NBA rosters. There's guys from Pepperdine. There's guys from LMU. Like there are players up and down the WCC who are getting opportunities at the NBA level, which just helps to increase that exposure that UCSD is really looking for with this sort of move. And the other thing that kind of you mentioned a little bit about how the league wants to move to probably add a couple more schools. And I'd imagine that the next move would include 2 schools. I don't think that when we hear the next one or whatever else that it's going to be a solo. To me, I don't think they want to be at 11. That's just is going to feel weird if they're at 11 schools. I think with this at 10, the next time by the time it's actually finalized, it's going to have to be 12. I think that's really where the sweet spot is for this conference, to get back to 12. But it was also kind of like hammered home, I think, enough, even though it was like the point number 4 on consideration was location. Because it was talked about the student athlete experience of many conferences having to travel back and forth across the country. And it really did seem that there was extra emphasis on the idea that we don't want our student athletes to have to do that. We want them to be in one region to make the travel easier and so that they can be student athletes. Because again, like I think the one thing that's always kind of missed, we talk about basketball and just the importance of that. And obviously for the WCC, that is sport number 1. But the other sports also have to do the travel too. Baseball has to do the travel. Track has to do the travel. Softball, soccer, volleyball. All these other teams also have to have the wear and tear of a season. And for some of those sports, they travel more than the basketball team will. So you do have to, looks like they're considering that and making sure that is not an overlooked factor in the additions that they might make moving forward. There was at least one report out there. The Big Mountain podcast did say that Irvine had been in talks with the WCC. Who knows if that is actually going to come to fruition? But I think we're starting to see the tide turn a little bit on what the WCC is going to be looking for and who we should now expect them to target now that we have the public school in the door.
I think a lot of points to make along that front is that you can't have norms when it comes to realignment anymore. Okay, Zach, we're both Bay Area people. We both know what Cal and Stanford are up to in the Atlantic Coast Conference. There's no such thing as norms. So when you look at the footprint of what the WCC was and now currently is, okay, they're admitting a public school. So what? Like, mix the ladder and the totem pole of everything that's gone on in realignment. That's like the line we're going to draw in the sand, that it's a public school that's the problem. And, need I remind a lot of people here that UC San Diego, pound for pound, is probably the best school academically in the conference now. Like, there's no sugarcoating that, how elite they are, the amount of applications they get. Chancellor was raving about that in their press conference. And I think one last thing to wrap up my point is, there was uniform support across the board to get UC San Diego in the building. The chancellor had his own committee, including the athletic directors, say, all right, you have X amount of weeks to do this, find out if this is a good move for us. Came back unanimous. President's Council, Commissioner Jackson mentioned there wasn't really much of a struggle, that where problems could have been problems maybe 2 years ago aren't necessarily ones now, and that the President's Council moved it along. And lastly, USD was in full support of this. They mentioned by name President Harris, saying, okay, they're ready to go. The Toreros want to welcome the Tritons into the West Coast Conference. And then when you consider the relationship that AD Edwards is talking about with AD Kim Yamasi down in San Diego, I think you realize how this fit came together so quick, why it's the right fit, and why UC San Diego, I think, eventually will be a player across a lot of league championships.
And nothing, but maybe nothing. Just I pulled it on Instagram just to kind of to gauge the fan reaction of the move, and not a single hate it on it. So this was a move that even I think most of you watching, the fans, love this move for the conference. This is one that I don't think anyone can really argue against. Like, I don't see the downside to adding a UC San Diego. So the fact that we're here, the fact that it's happened, the only thing I might be I would like to have it a little sooner. I don't want to have to wait 3 seasons for to see UC San Diego in the league. But this is a move that made almost way too much sense. And we're here. It has been announced. And now, of course, we have to wait and see, because we also saw Grand Canyon back out of its deal in the 11th hour. So you never know until they're actually here. But this just feels like the right fit at the right time for the WCC as it is transitioning into a new era next season without the likes of Gonzaga, Washington State, and Oregon State. Now, speaking of the Zags, they released their non-conference schedule just a little while ago as we were starting to record and get everything set. And well, as we are so used to seeing, the Zags have an absolute gauntlet of a non-conference schedule. I do not have the graphic ready because it happens so fast, but you look at the fact that they have Oklahoma, Creighton, Arizona State, Alabama, Maryland, Kentucky, UCLA, Oregon. They're in the players era term, so there's one more game to be added in that grouping. This is, as we normally see from the Zags, it is going to be one of the more fun non-conference schedules, if not the most fun non-conference schedule in the entire country. They are going to get tested a lot. I do wonder a little bit if they've maybe overplayed their hand, because while I like this Zags team, looking at this schedule, I do think they're going to hit some hurdles and some bumps in the road because of just where they are versus some of the predictions of where some of these other teams are going to be.
That, and I think this is probably one of the Gonzaga teams with more questions in recent memory than we've had going in, at least. So, for example, Braden Smith, a wholly capable point guard for sure, no doubt about that. But is it fair to expect him to be Ryan Nembhard? That's one question. When we had Andy Patton on a few weeks ago, it's, can Gonzaga shoot the 3 ball well enough to be consistent and win games? Steele Venters is coming back, but he's coming off a 2-year hiatus. what's a fair burden of expectation for the veteran to do that, and like how are some of these younger guys going to mix in? We know what Graham Ike is, we know what Braden Huff is. Like, Huff will probably get better now with more consistent playing time, but there's a lot of unanswered questions in terms of how uniform Gonzaga is going to look over the course of the time. But you mentioned the schedule, and obviously there's so much to like about it. Obviously the return trip against Creighton in that home and home. And we've had like all these little like leak out games, so to speak, in terms of Gonzaga playing Kentucky down in Nashville, playing Oregon over in Portland, and then obviously the Players era. So I think there's ample opportunity for the Zags to be challenged. And I think more than anything, even if they overscheduled, you kind of want to find out who you are. And I think Gonzaga will absolutely find out who they are by the time the last buzzer goes down against Oregon down at the Moda Center. So I think overall, I really like this schedule for Gonzaga because they're going to find out what they need, because they're going to need to beef up at some point, especially because teams want to come for them in their last season in the West Coast Conference. So I think it's overall very much a net positive in the long term, even if in the short term, Zag fans struggle a little bit with what they're seeing from their squad.
And I will qualify this thinking about what happened 2 seasons ago with the Zags, where I think they lost 4 games in the non-conference and the sky was falling. Everything was like, this is the worst Zag team ever. Nothing's going right. You know what? Sometimes we do need to kind of take a step back and remember it's like, it's not about where they are in November, December. It is about where they are in March. And last year was the year that broke the Sweet 16 streak. And the fact that they had been to 9 straight Sweet 16s was a ridiculous run. And this is going to set themselves up well. Again, like I think to your point, in the long run, this is going to be a good thing for the Zags. They're going to know what works and what doesn't. They're going to be battle tested by the time they get to WCC play. They'll be plenty battle tested by the time they have to get to March Madness, which already assuming, yes, of course, they're going to be in March Madness because when are the Zags not actually playing in March? But looking at the schedule, there's nothing really to scoff at. It's only like, are they going to hit maybe a few more bumps in the road early on? I mean, it wouldn't surprise me if they somehow got to January and they are 9-5, which I know is a scary thought for some Zag fans with 5 losses, but this is also very capable. They could end up winning 13 of these because they click early and they figure it out.
Yeah, and that, to go to your point about the 9 Sweet 16s in a row, you're talking to 2 guys and 2 guys associated with programs who would love to have that alongside.
I'll take one.
I would take an appearance in the first 4. So I mean, there's so many, like, the spoiled is not the right word, but like the expectations are different, yes, but at the same time, it's like you have to understand what you've accomplished. It's not over yet because obviously Mark Few is still patrolling the sidelines, but relish in what you're doing. And even if Gonzaga trips over themselves a little more than usual, I think they'll be better for it. And I think when you have teams that are trying to hunt you down like missiles in the St. Mary's and the USFs and Santa Clara's that want to give you the business in the last year in the league, I think this is an apt challenge for what they need to do in order to find out who they are down the road.
Now that we've kind of talked about what Gonzaga has been up to, we're going to get into our season previews, and we're tipping it off with the San Diego Toreros. So this was a squad a year ago. Obviously, this was the team that sat at the bottom of the WCC, 6-27 a year ago, 2-16 in the WCC. Steve Lavin in year 4 of his 6-year contract. And so there's a lot of pressure, I think, on this San Diego squad, but there's at least some hope for optimism. There's hope in the building because of a number of things that changed over the last 6 months. They have completed their new basketball performance center. They have launched their NIL program, and now they brought in a class of new players that really is going to kind of reflect the resources and the commitment that USD has kind of shown over the last half a year. And we can kind of take a look up and down the roster. There's some legit talent on the squad. Who's kind of jumping out at you? Because there's obviously definitely a few names that I kind of like, I'm bookmarking of these guys I think are going to make an impact pretty early on.
I think one name, and both in terms of how are they going to make an impact and how are they going to transition. I think Adrian McIntyre. I think that's everyone's like, oh my God, of course, this has to be the guy going up, basically up a few levels to, so to speak, to now play at this level of college basketball. It's one thing to, be labeled with all the stars and like the notoriety. It's another thing to go out and do it. And I think that's the one thing I really want to see what San Diego does. A lot of what we've been posturing over for the last like few weeks or so is that San Diego can do it, but will San Diego do it? Because you've seen the reverse end when they can't do it and they go way young, and then you see what happens last year where they were helpless team at times. So it's not make or break, so to speak, yet, at least in my opinion, for Steve Lavin, but let's time to get some tangible progress back in the other direction like they were 2 seasons ago.
Now, the one thing that you kind of point out, like McIntyre coming in, he is a veteran. He is an older player that's going to be coming in, and that is a difference with the San Diego squad. They have 11 players coming in who have 2 or more years of collegiate experience, and that's a big deal for a team that really early on in the last season last even few years have been so reliant upon younger players to really kind of lift them up. And that can have its ups and downs. We saw that work 2 seasons ago, and we saw that not work last year. So we've kind of seen the good and the bad with San Diego. But a couple of names that Coach Lavin brought up as guys that, because he mentioned them initially when we had our conversation, and we'll play a little bit of that interview in just a bit, that Asan Diop is coming in over from Colorado, 6'10" forward, and he didn't get a whole lot of playing time with the Buffs, but this is someone who's going to give them legit size. And I think that was one of the components that San Diego just did not have last year, did not have a lot of 2 years ago. Yeah, you can point to Steven Jamerson, but not a whole lot of help after that. And that's one of the things you need in this conference. You need some legit size. You need someone who's going to be able to really kind of hold their own against the Gonzaga front line, the St. Mary's front line, the USF front line, the Santa Clara front line. When you think about even just like last year's, how big that Santa Clara team was. And also another one that was brought up is the Wake Forest transfer, Taylor Johnson, another sophomore, but this guy is going to be able to run this offense. He can do it with speed. He has great vision on the court, and they brought in enough shooters, I think, around them to be able to stretch the floor a little bit more. I think their offense is just going to look so much more dynamic than it did this past season. One of the other ones, we didn't get into name specific here because they hadn't actually been announced yet. But one of the more recent kids coming in is Peter Winkowski, coming over from Poland, 6'10" center. I was watching some film on him last night, and this kid, like, he's got athleticism, he's got strength, he attacks the rim. And I think that's another, again, talk about size and someone who's going to be able to be a factor down low. This Winkowski looks like someone who's going to be able to really hold his own early on. He was in the FIBA U20s a couple years ago, 10 points, 7 rebounds a game. He's 22 years old, coming over for his first collegiate season. So this is, again, another older player that's going to be coming in and not going to be afraid of some of these bigger front lines that we're seeing from the top half of the WCC.
Kind of to almost make a joke out of it, San Diego kind of needed a battering ram at center, and it like you mentioned, it couldn't have just been Steven Jamerson like it was over the course of the last few years. So I think mixing Job together and mixing in the transfer you just mentioned coming in from Poland right then and there's a lot more, I guess, opportunity, so to speak, along the interior for San Diego. And that's something you have to do because you have to build resistance. And I think that's the one thing the Toreros really couldn't do. They didn't have enough resistance along the front line to when teams wanted to impose their will. And I kind of wanted to almost put it all together. You mentioned shooters being alongside. KJ Bradley returns. That's someone who can light it up from distance. And we've seen him light it up in some individual games. So I think that's a welcome addition when you consider what's going on elsewhere with San Diego. And I think the big messaging that I've got and what you've seen and what we've talked about with Steve Lavin and such is that there's alignment now with USD, the institution, USD, the athletic department, and USD, the basketball program. There's alignment, there's NIL collective, there's a basketball facility that was not built and not ready to go this time last year. So I think you think of the alignment, I think that's critical. So I think all that combined together, lots of good going on for San Diego right now. And now it's a matter of putting it together because it's getting to be the point where there's not going to be a lack of excuses as to why you can't do this. You're in a good area. You now have good facilities, and you're recruiting to a better level than you have in the immediate years past. So time for San Diego to take those next steps.
Yeah, so let's get into that conversation. We'll play our interview with Steve Lavin. This is just a clip of it. We'll have the entire interview available on the YouTube channel, so be sure to check it out there. But here's our conversation with a little bit of that conversation with Steve Lavin about what this year's team, the optimism that we're going to see this coming year.
Come with the right energy for these next few seasons.
Yeah, I mean, we understood that it was going to be challenging because we didn't have a collective, we didn't have an NIL, and as a result, we were putting rosters together without funding, and in a conference where the majority of the schools had a 3-year jump on us when it comes to collective and NIL, being able to pay players. But from the beginning, Jim Harris, our president, said he was committed to men's basketball and to women's basketball as well. We have a new women's coach, Blanche Alverson, who came in from Georgia Tech. She's also brought dynamic energy, the staff, and the work they're doing already. You can see it. And so we knew we were taking notes along the way. You're learning as we all do in life. It wasn't a surprise to me that the West Coast Conference is strong, outstanding coaches, great tradition, strong academics. In some ways, the West Coast Conference reminds me of the Big East Conference, different in scale, but I spent 5 years in the Big East in terms of basketball-centric schools, Catholic, great rivalries, great geographical footprints for recruiting, and just strong heritage and tradition in the Big East. And really, when you look at the West Coast Conference, even with the addition of Seattle, their heritage going back to Elgin Baylor was outstanding, and they had some great teams in the past. We know about Gonzaga's run, as successful as any Division I program over the past 20 plus years. St. Mary's with Randy Bennett has had it cracking for decades. Loyola Marymount, right, with their tradition under Paul Westhead, with Gathers and Kimball and company. So Pepperdine had outstanding teams under Gary Colson, Jim Herrick, Tom Asbury, Lorenzo Romar. So this league up and down, and USD also, has their rightful place as a terrific basketball program. The history of it going back to Phil Wolpert, who was an athletic director and a coach here, and he passed the baton to Bernie Bickerstaff, and that's when we were Division II. Then Jim Bravelli came in and transitioned the program from D2 to D1. Coach Bravelli was the first to make the NCAA tournament in the early 80s. He then moved on to the University of San Francisco, where he played basketball, is in the Hall of Fame up there. And then Hank Egan came in, had a terrific run, made an NCAA tournament. Brad Holland came in, had a strong run, made an NCAA tournament. Billy Greer made an NCAA tournament. Now we've had a gap for 18 years with some good coaches that came through. Lamont Smith and Sam Scholl that we took over 3 years ago. So the goal on both the men's and women's side in this relaunch of our basketball programs is to get back to the winner's circle, to play in the postseason. But the alignment now will allow us to be competitive. You have to have the funding to be able to build a roster. That's just the reality in college basketball and college athletics in this revolutionary space. And so then to get this outstanding basketball performance center and to have the roster space to bring in 13 new players. So all of it happened in a 6-month window. It could have been that we got the facility in year 1, we got funded in year 2, and then we brought in a class like this in year 3. But instead, we really have this alignment, and it all happened in the last 6 months.
So I guess because it kind of all came together at the same time, what was the impact of the new facility, the NIL, the partnerships and whatnot? How did that impact and the recruiting, and how has what we see from this first class that you've brought in with all of these new resources, is that reflective in the class we're able to bring in?
Yeah, it really is. I mean, we are located in a great city, San Diego. It's an attractive destination. This campus for years has been voted most beautiful campus in the country, or always in the top 3 in terms of just the beauty. And then now you add this state-of-the-art basketball performance center, which centralizes our training and really just delivers to our student athletes the ability to have everything you need under one roof. And from a presentation standpoint, there has to be the substance, the teeth, which is the funding and the commitment by the university to want men's and women's basketball to be successful. But there's no doubt in the recruiting presentation, you walk through this building and you don't have to say much. It speaks for itself when you look at the design, the materials used. I mean, they didn't spare any expense. It was a $35 million project. And you could see it, at different stages. I was shown the renderings when I interviewed in New Orleans at the Final Four with the president and the athletic director. But it's one thing to see it, the design and to see the renderings. It's another to actually be there as it was built, and then to walk into it a couple months back and actually have these offices that we come to every day. So it's a little surreal because it's all happened so quickly in these past 6 months, but it was critical in the recruiting process. We have a player from Colorado, Hassan Diop. And so, when he's coming from a university that has outstanding facilities like Colorado does, it was important that we were able to demonstrate we're serious about basketball. And so Wake Forest, Tyler Johnson, an outstanding point guard, he's from New York, played at Louisville, that obviously is committed, has great tradition when it comes to basketball, and also at Wake Forest. So 2 teams out of the ACC, and we knew we were competing against other top programs. So for him to come in with his family, his representatives, and for them to see this building, there is no doubt it helped us close on this class and put together the largest class in school history, 13 new players. And if you look at the walk-on that joined us as well, it's really a class of 14 new prospects. And I don't think that happens. And it's the quality, not just the quantity. These are players that have skills. They're going to be able to help us immediately. We're going to be able to play at different pace. We've got some size. We've got the balance of size and strength and skill and quickness, and the ability at both ends of the floor to have the flexibility. That's important. That as a coach, it's a luxury if your personnel really fits your style of play, which we want to be able to play at pace. We want to, be able to mix our defenses and give teams different looks and try and wear them down in a cumulative fashion. And that was the personnel that I had when I was at UCLA. It was the personnel I had at St. John's. It's taken us 3 years to get to this place because we weren't in position to have this facility and this funding that we now have. So the future is bright.
So obviously there's always going to be a lot of optimism this time of year, because you always want to think that, oh, your team has a great shot now because we haven't seen all the games he played. But there's also kind of a realistic kind of look at this, because obviously, like, Coach Lavin has seen the bad of what it can look like at San Diego. But this is obviously, he's had such great success at UCLA when he was with St. John's, even like the first year of being kind of the overachiever at San Diego. I mean, when you look at the film of some of the players that are coming in, you look at who the size and just the pedigree of the guys that are in this class, it is different than we saw a year ago, because so many of the others, like say last year, and it's no fault of the guys who were with the Toreros a year ago. It's clearly at a different level going into this year with this group.
It's always hard to put numbers and positions on that, but I do think just in terms of contextualizing. I think the mid-pack of the WCC is going to be a lot more compact this year. And I mean that from terms of like the 5 through 10 region. I think there are a lot of teams that can fall in a lot of different combinations in regards to where they fall by the time the conference season rolls to an end and we get set for Las Vegas. I think the floor is, like, for me, the worst case scenario of San Diego is they finish 10th. I think they're more talented than, for example, a team like Portland. I think that difference is noticeable on paper, at least. And so where they should, even in the worst case scenario, should still be beating Portland. I think if they peak and they click, I think the Toreros can nab a 7th to 8th place in the conference. I'm not 100% convinced on the ceiling, so to speak, for this team, but I do think more than anything, it's the floor that needed repairing, and I do think the floor has improved dramatically, kind of like you've mentioned in terms of the talent transition from last year to this year.
Yeah, I mean, I'm sort of in the same ballpark with you as far as like their range. I think the ceiling for them is about 5th. I am a little bit more bullish on their ceiling. Like if everything goes right, because I also do think, to your point, that there's a lot of teams that are bunched up in the middle right now. That you can throw Santa Clara in there, LMU in there, Seattle in there. You can throw Oregon State and Washington in that mix. That there's a bunch of teams that maybe there's clear, like some of these teams have better ceilings than San Diego, but San Diego's going to be in the mix, I think, all year long. And because it all, not only is there more talent on this team, this is a deeper team than we have seen over the last couple of years. And I think that's one of the other things is you get deeper in the conference play, like guys start wearing down, like, and you need at least another option to be able to go to. So this San Diego squad, I think ceiling, they feel like a mid-pack WCC team. So 5th is there. The floor, I think the floor is at least a tiny bit higher. I have them at 9th being the floor. So it's still kind of like a 4 or 5 spot window where I think the Torero squad ends up. But there's any number of storylines you can kind of look at and think about with any of these squads. But for San Diego specifically, I'm looking at the building blocks of, can this season be a building block for the future? As Coach Lavin talked about in the interview, is that this was the first year where they kind of all got it aligned. Everything was finally in place this year. So we get to see year one of what it looks like. And is this the opportunity? Is this a chance for everything to build off of that? Because also it's the last year of Gonzaga, Washington State, Oregon State. So going into next year, I know a lot of WCC teams are looking at that as being, finally the giant is gone and there's opportunities for the rest of us. So will we see that jump next year? Like, is this year one going to be just a great starting point? And next year, will we see it grow even more for Steve Lavin's team?
So I think, if nothing else, you do want to see the direction go in the right direction, I guess, so to speak. But I do think part of it is also you want to see progress. I mean, as much as you can offer to yourself, okay, next year we got this. It's a building block for next year. At some point, that runs thin with how much college basketball can change on a year-to-year basis. So I think of it like, okay, they win maybe 13, 14 games this year. Okay, you can see where the difference was from last year to this year. But if they win 8, 9 games but have a lot of close losses, and then how much can you really bank on yourself to say, okay, we're going to improve in the next year? Because it's not necessarily guaranteed with the way college athletics is. So I think it's important for San Diego, while close in the mid-pack, while everyone can get jumbled up and everyone can fall flat on each other's face, and it's going to be separated by 1 to 2 games, of which all of them will be of consequence, there's a certain tipping point to where you should close these out. And not should in terms of we're better than you, but should in terms of, okay, we need to see that tangible progress at this time during Steve Lavin's tenure.
All right, so that'll wrap it up for the Toreros. Next up is another one of those teams that is going to be in the middle of the pack. A number one of these teams who I think has a very interesting ceiling and also a very interesting floor, and that is the newest addition to the WCC, not UC San Diego, but the Seattle Redhawks, who will be playing this year in the West Coast Conference. They're coming over from the WAC. Last year, they went 14-18, 8-8 in league play. But this was a squad that also had wins over Washington, had wins over UC San Diego. So this was a team that showed capability to get some really good wins, despite the fact that they had what was probably an underwhelming season overall. Head coach Chris Victor, this is his 5th year as the head coach of Seattle, his 9th overall with Seattle U. And before last year, they were running on a streak of 3 straight 20-win seasons. So there had been extended success from this program in the WAC. And this was someone who also is familiar with WCC coaches. He was on the same staff at Eastern Washington with Shante Leggins and with David Riley. So there is some level of comfort with some of the coaching staffs. There is, even though Seattle has not played a whole lot of WCC teams over the last few years, there's not going to be a huge leap, I don't think, on the comfort level at the WCC level, because they still did have to play the likes of Washington, UC San Diego, Grand Canyon, Utah Valley over the last few years. So while it is a step up overall for the league, and I think we're going to see that in what Seattle has brought in to this point, it's not, I don't think Seattle's going to be like, there's going to be phased at all in their early transition.
I think, honestly, the phrase that comes to mind for what Seattle can be is they can be a pain in the butt to everybody. I think that's really what sticks out to me, is the way they play defense, the way they crash the glass, the way they play hard. And I know you think of some of the other teams in the WCC, that's like kind of the identity. St. Mary's, for example, like it's going to be defense. It's going to be the intensity. It's going to be the fundamentals. And for Seattle, I think you make a trip up to the Pacific Northwest playing in the Redhawk gymnasium, like they can drag you into a mud fight. And I think it remains to be seen how some of those teams would kind of like interact. So like you mentioned David Riley, like if last year's Washington State team played Seattle, I would probably take Seattle just by the way they play and the way Washington State, when they got taken out of things, it kind of just fell out from the underside. So in this case, I look at Seattle, even though they play a climate pledge for some games, it's like they can drag teams into the mud, and they can be, kind of in the same realm as an LMU, where you're like, man, I bit off more than I bargained for on a game like today. So I think that's kind of what I look for with them, like their defensive identity, because they know who they are. They don't try and stray too far away from it. And when you're going into a new conference, you kind of have to almost double down and embrace who you are, because if you try and change too much, like, oh no, we're going to face these guys who are supposedly a lot better, our stuff's not going to work. Well, then you kind of already started the battle on the back foot. So that's one of the few things I really want to see from Seattle, how they impose their will to start the season and start conference play, and kind of how teams kind of interact with how Seattle can potentially bring them into some low scoring affairs.
So you bring up that, and then thinking about what they were able to bring in to kind of help that defense. The first name that comes off the board in my mind is Brock Felder, because this is a guy at Southern Utah who really was one of the better defenders in that conference. 5.8 points, 6.2 rebounds. He led the WAC with over 2 blocks a game. So this is someone who's going to be able to really lock down in the interior. And for a lot of, again, we talk about, you need to have that defensive presence. You need to have that strong front line, and Seattle has the building blocks of that. You bring in Brock Felder as a huge part of that. Bring in Austin Maurer coming from Grand Canyon. And this is a kid who's from the Pacific Northwest. He was a former Gatorade Player of the Year in the state of Oregon. He didn't get a whole lot of playing time when he was with the Lopes, but coming up to Seattle, he's going to get more of that playing time. He's going to get more opportunity. And you kind of get a little bit of that mixed match of someone who's going to be more the offensive guy and someone who's going to be more the defensive guy for the Seattle squad. And even on the perimeter, there's some legit defensive presence from one of the returners, Malik Arrington, 7 points, 4.5 assists. But this is a guy who's been an all-league defensive player in 2 different leagues. So this is someone on the perimeter is going to be able to get at it, get after it. And just when you start going up and down the Seattle roster, this is going to be a tough, gritty roster. Another one of those guys, Brayden Maldonado, who we got a chance to talk to, we'll play the interview in a little bit, is also another one of those guys who like oozes the Seattle personality for for what Chris Victor wants this team to be. This is going to be, they're probably going to be involved in more rock fights than you think, and almost probably going to be talking about maybe a WCC comparison. Maybe not as flashy at times, but kind of maybe somewhere between St. Mary's and LMU is the style of what we might see from a Seattle squad.
Yeah, and then you think of we talked to Brayden Maldonado, and kind of like the duo of him and John Christophilus are trying just to showcase what all these new transfers that you mentioned of what the Seattle standard is. And when you have extended success of 3 20-plus win seasons, it's hard to not deny the fundamental facts of, okay, these guys kind of know what they're doing. They know what they're talking about. And I can put my full faith that if I do my best, that we're going to be in at least a good position to win. So I think of all those factors combined, and I think of where they are probably going to stack up in the mid pack. You can think of them on you can, okay, not to say they will, but you can think of them on an LMU tier of, it requires your best effort. And if you don't bring your best effort, you can easily be spat out the other side with a loss.
Yeah, I mean, you brought up LMU. I think LMU is a great example of, like, when you think about how hard it was for teams to go to LMU, go to Gersten Pavilion and get a win. It was a tough building to play in last year. They beat Santa Clara. They beat Oregon State. They took St. Mary's down to the wire. It's like they really played well at home, and I do think that that's something very similar that we could see from Seattle at playing in the Redhawks Center, especially when you're thinking about like that tight environment. This is a building whose capacity is listed at 999. So this is a small building that they will be playing in for those games. Yes, they do play some of their contests over at Climate Pledge Arena. Those will be probably for some of the bigger games you'd imagine. Probably Gonzaga, St. Mary's might be playing over there for that one. Do know that they will be playing at least a couple of squads over at Climate Pledge. So that'll be fun to see them in that building. But there's also some familiar names for WCC folks in here, or at least one in particular, and that is Jun Suk-yo coming over from Gonzaga will be on this squad. And this is another guy who really just did not get an opportunity to play at Gonzaga, obviously because there's a lot of depth on that squad. But now we're going to be able to see if he's going to get a shot to show what he's capable of doing. We've seen what he can do in international competition, and now it'll be his real opportunity to get on the floor and show what he can do.
Yeah, and I don't know if you want to temper expectations for Junio, but it's important to understand that when you have your first long runway of playing time, there will be bumps in the road. And you think of kind of who he was within the Gonzaga fandom at times, and even internationally, he's kind of a fan favorite already. So to see kind of like what opportunity he's going to have to play with under Chris Victor, I think for a fact that he's going to have to earn his playing time. Like, there's going to be no sugarcoating about it. So his improvement on the defensive end of the floor will kind of take him as far as he can go in terms of making the Seattle rotation and being a mainstay. Because I think it's kind of almost implicitly understood, okay, he can be a shooter if you give him enough space. But what else is he going to do on the floor if he's either not shooting well or not getting the space to? Can you contribute in other ways to winning with your gravity on the offensive end, or two, can you find a way to make an impact on defense? So whether that's stealing the ball or even funneling down the right way, it's just those little things add up, and that's what I want to see out of Junio.
And when we do see that, I mean, like, you look down at St. Mary's with Randy Bennett, and like at this stage, it's like, if you don't play defense, you don't see the floor. So it could very much be, again, there's a lot of competition on that Seattle squad for minutes. There's a lot of players who are going to be vying for playing time, and there are going to be some guys who are sitting on the bench whom you might think probably should have gotten more or a little bit more of a chance or whatnot, because I think the Seattle team is going to just be pretty deep at certain spots, especially I think at the guard positions. There's going to be a lot of competition for those minutes. But as we kind of get into this, as we're starting to talk about it, let's go to our interview with Brayden Maldonado, and he can talk a little bit more about what we should expect from the Redhawks going into the season.
Great. Have a long season, so you get a couple weeks off, but we were all excited to really get back and really meet each other. A lot of new guys here, and since we've all been back, we've really gelled well together. The chemistry's been great. Very intense practices, so it's been a lot of fun being back with some of the guys from last year and meeting a lot of the new guys. It's been a lot of fun this summer.
And Brayden, you kind of for us in the media, we're never going to know what it's like, and maybe it's just boring and it's another day at the office. But you're playing in the WAC. You're transitioning to the WCC. Is there anything different from, say, practice on June 30th to practice on July 2nd, either from your perspective, Coach Victor's perspective? Like, what have you guys been experiencing now that you'll be in a new league for this upcoming season?
I mean, that's a good question. I think I wouldn't say a lot has changed. I mean, in the summer, obviously, there's a certain amount of hours you're allowed to work out and stuff like that, time-wise. But I feel like for us, we kept the same intensity. We know the WAC's a tough conference, as well as going into the WCC is going to be a tough conference. I think we've kept the intensity. I think our practices have even jumped up a level with intensity. I think we know we're heading into a tough conference, and it's going to be a really fun year. So it's going to be a new challenge for us, and I think we haven't taken any of it lightly, and we're ready.
And you do have, again, you mentioned a lot of the new guys that are going to be on this roster, and you brought up a couple of guys who were in the WAC with you, obviously Brock Felder, and then also Austin Maurer coming over from Grand Canyon. So you do have some of those familiar faces. And you talked about just how the level of competition in practice has kind of ramped up. Do you think that this team is maybe a little bit deeper than where you were a year ago? Obviously, like you guys were 14 and 18 a year ago, but it really seems like that the roster as a whole is a lot deeper than it was a year ago, and there's going to be definitely a step back up this season.
Yeah, for sure. I think, like you said, we added guys who were in the WAC with us last year, which are going to be a huge help. Those two big guys with Austin and Brock, as well as adding some other guys depth-wise, which was very helpful. I also think just guys coming back like Malik, it was his first year here as well with me. Just guys, with another year under their belt, playing together under the system. I think it's going to be a big step for everybody. Guys with experience, guys coming in who have played with us and against us and stuff like that. So I think the depth is definitely going to help this year, as well as all of us kind of having another year under our belt, under the same program, playing with each other and stuff like that. So I think it's going to be really fun.
So as you're adding new guys, obviously a lot of what college athletics is a team from last year is not the same team that walks in the building day one of the following season. But what's it kind of like, almost setting the standard, so to speak, for what Seattle basketball is going to be alongside guys like John Christophoulos? Like, what's it like showcasing of what you guys want to demand from yourselves in order to try and be the best version of you guys over the course of this year?
I think it starts kind of with the intensity part that I brought in. Guys coming in, like you said, they're your teammates. You want to welcome them, but when we're in practice, we're going at each other. You know what I'm saying? We're going hard, and just letting guys know that we play hard over here. We play defense. You know what I'm saying? We really do it all. So just when guys come in, I'm saying welcome them with open arms, but also like going at guys. That's how you get better, is competition and intensity, like I said. And if one guy brings it, we all rise to that occasion. So I think just guys coming back, letting people know that like we're about it here, like we're intense and we're going to play hard and we're going to love you because you're our teammates. But when we're in practice, we're going at each other and we're going to get better.
And one of the things going into this year, because again, like you're one of the returners on this squad with a handful of others, how has maybe your role changed now that you were kind of the more experienced one under Coach Victor's system and on that Seattle campus? How has that kind of role changed for you as you've been working with your new teammates?
Yeah. I would say I've came into more of a leadership role. I would say I've been a lot more vocal. I think it's kind of normal for guys. Like my last year was my first year to come in, kind of to try to get comfortable and try to feel everybody out. You don't want to step on anybody's toes and stuff like that. But I think I really found my voice at the end of last year, just being vocal, keeping the guys' heads together, mental space, just making sure guys are ready and locked in. So I think this year, me, like I said, having a year under my belt and coming in, kind of knowing what's expected from me, I think I've taken a big step in the vocal leadership role, as well as, making sure guys are doing what they're supposed to do. Even on campus, like classes, stuff like that, teaching the new guys who have came around. So I think I just came more comfortable in my area and with my surroundings. So it kind of gave me a voice, where I'm confident and I can speak, with authority and stuff like that. The guys can respect me and stuff. So
I kind of want to follow up to that answer, because everyone's leadership path is different. It's not natural to everybody. And kind of comparing yourself to your high school days, does leadership come naturally for you now? Or do you, even at this level, do you still have to kind of like, quote unquote, like find it, or have like a coach tell you, say, hey, go take charge of this? Or how did leadership come to you in a Seattle Redhawks uniform?
I think last year we kind of struggled with someone who was really always vocal And I think that's just kind of where it started at. Some days you come in, you're tired of practicing, and it's real quiet in the gym, and everyone knows quiet gyms are losing gyms. So I don't know. I kind of just, whether I was playing, whether I wasn't, whether I was doing well, whether I wasn't, I tried to just bring as much energy as possible. And I think that's kind of where it started for me. As you said, like in high school as well. I think some of those down days, like you can feel the energy in the gym. I would just come in and try to crack a joke or something, or, just be loud so people can just, turn up, be positive and stuff like that. So I think it kind of started with me just being super vocal and trying to get the energy up in the gym. And then once I see, everyone feeds off that, I kind of just keep it going. And Coach Victor said he liked what I was doing. So, I kind of just kept with that. People benefited from it. So I kind of just took that upon myself to just keep it going and being consistent with that. I think that's the biggest thing, is being consistent.
Now, one of the new things for a lot of those of us who cover the WCC, follow the WCC, is we're going to get to two new buildings, not only the Redhawks Center, but also, because you guys do play games over at Climate Pledge Arena. Just kind of talk about the energy and the excitement that there is around the campus, and what WCC fans should expect coming into Seattle for your games.
Yeah, the Redhawks Center, it's rowdy. It gets nice. It gets nice and loud in there. It's not a huge gym, which I kind of like, but I think it plays into our favor, because we can pack it out with all the Redhawk fans, because they love coming to games and they're loud. So at the Redhawk Center, you can definitely expect a lot of red and hear it to be really loud. And then at Climate Pledge, it's just it's a brand new, beautiful arena as well, and people can't wait. They hear the Climate Pledge games and everyone goes running. So it's going to be a lot of fun coming to Seattle. The energy is always great. Fans are always great, and it's always going to be a good time and a good game.
Do you have to make almost any adjustments trying to shoot in those different like style of gyms per se, different like depth perception, different backgrounds? What's the transition like, if at all, between the Redhawks Center and then going towards CPA and trying to still try and give buckets?
Yeah, it's a little different. I think the pregame shoot around always helps. You get in there, because we get in there and get a lot of shots up, so you can kind of feel if you're shooting it too hard, shooting it too, you can feel the difference. So I think the pregame shoot around definitely always helps. But for me, I try to just keep it out of my head. I try to think that every gym's the same, and I'm just shooting the same way. I don't want to put a little mental block in there that, probably isn't there in real life. So I kind of just try to keep it all the same for me. But I think the pregame shoot arounds help a lot. You can kind of feel how your jumper's feeling, where you're shooting at on the floor and stuff like that. So I think that helps for sure.
Now, one of the things, obviously, like a lot of the WCC gyms are also not too big. Like you have, most of them are somewhere between 6,000 to 4,000 seat facilities. So no other gym is going to be all that big. But talking about also just the competition level in the WCC versus the WAC. Obviously, there were some really good teams in the WAC at Grand Canyon, Utah Valley, like in their tournament level quality teams. You come to a league with Gonzaga, St. Mary's, San Francisco, and these are teams who have obviously are either every year tournament teams or teams who have been in the tournament recently. As you kind of like start to prep for that level of competition in a new league, what sort of like excitement, or how has maybe the practices changed, knowing that you do have a lot of teams who are, especially in certain cases, are established college basketball names and brands?
Yeah, for sure. I think like you touched on moving into a bigger conference, you would say, with teams who are always in the tournament and really big names. I think it's super exciting. When you're in college and in the pros, really anywhere, you want to play against the best teams, so you want to see where you stack up against. And I think you playing against the best will raise your level to be the best. So I think for us, it's super exciting going there, being the first year here, playing a lot of the teams that we haven't played before, knowing how good they are and how historic they are. I think it's really exciting for us, and it really puts a chip on our shoulder, because it's going to be our first year here. We're coming from the WAC, probably a smaller school, you could say. But I think a lot of us are really excited. And like kind of what you said, to touch on the practices, been super locked into details, small details. And like I said, the intensity, we kind of know what we're going into, and we're trying to prepare right now as much as we can to play those teams.
You mentioned in that answer, like raising the level. Who are some of those guys that maybe we're not familiar with that you are seeing in practice day by day that have raised their level exponentially and are going to earn their way onto having a lot of playing time during WCC games this year?
Yeah, for sure. I think a kid named Rayvon Adams, he redshirted for us last year, young freshman. He's about 6'8", long arms, great athlete, and the kid just plays really hard. So he does everything asked. He does all the right things. So I think Ray will earn himself a lot of minutes as well. and JoJo Murphy as well, new kid coming in, Division II transfer. Shoots the ball really well, plays hard. I think he'll earn a lot of minutes as well. So those two guys, I'm really excited, as well as we have a lot of utility guys who can play everywhere and guys who play the right way and play hard. So there'll be a lot of minutes to go around for sure, and I'm excited to see everybody on the court.
Yeah, and as you're starting to, again, there's a lot of new guys, a lot of new faces, and with this squad. And we talked to Coach Victor a little bit about a month or so ago about what the personality of his teams have been. And it really does seem like this is, even based off last year, this is going to be defensive-minded team. This is going to be a scrappier team, tougher team. Kind of talk about just like what the mentality or the personality seems to be right now. Because obviously year to year, teams' personalities can change, and those start to meld from one to the next. But what does it feel like right now, like what the personality of the squad's going to be?
Yeah, I think like Coach Victor said, and kind of what you touched on. I mean, we're defense. That's what we're about. We play hard. We're gonna get on loose balls. We're gonna play defense. We're gonna pick you up full court. We're gonna be aggressive. We're gonna rebound, and then we're gonna try to get out and transition and run. I think for us, shooting doesn't always travel. One thing that can always travel is effort and defense. And I think, on some of those nights where you're not shooting the ball that well, if you can get those stops, you can win a lot of games. And I think defense has showed really through all levels in the NCAA tournament, really everywhere. The teams that defend are the teams that go far. So for us, we always hang our hat on defense. That's something we harp on all the time in practice. And I think that's why we're one of the better defensive teams in the nation.
And you think of Seattle defense, I think some of those other defining characteristics you mentioned, rebound and run, because it all works together in symmetry, so to speak. I do want to kind of peel back the curtain a little bit towards your experience at Seattle, and kind of what's been the most rewarding part about being a Redhawk so far, and kind of like we have not seen or really experienced the Pacific Northwest as much as we can as WCC media members, but kind of like peel the curtain for us of what has been the most rewarding part about being either in the Seattle area, being part of the Seattle program, or just in general your experience.
Yeah, I mean, it's been great. I mean, I'm a kid from Alaska, so I've been here quite a bit. Just, traveling and playing basketball at AU and stuff like that. But now there's a lot of love in the city for sure, especially in the area that we're at. People show a lot of love. People are always coming out to support. People always want to see us do well. And I think that's one of the most rewarding factors in our home games. Like I said, we don't have a huge arena, but people always come to show love after the games. There's kids always wanting to talk to you about the game, want to sign something, as well as some of the camps we put on in the summer. Kids always love to come back and watch games. And I think that's always a fun thing. So I remember when I was a kid, I used to look up to all the college players and always wanted to play like them and, go to games and just talk to them. So I just think after the games, we're talking to younger kids, elementary school kids about basketball and just how happy they are to see us play. I think that's a super rewarding thing for me, just being a young kid. And I've always loved basketball. So I think for me in the area, just all the love that the community shows, it means a lot.
I love that. Some of the best parts aren't even when you're tipping the ball off and going and playing for 40 hard minutes. So yeah. I like that.
And I mean, one of the things, you touched on, like the support you get in Seattle. I mean, Seattle is a basketball town. Like it always feels like regardless if it's high school, college, pros, like that is a basketball town. Like when you talk, what's kind of been that vibe, like an experience, like kind of being part of the basketball community there in Seattle, because there is such a rich history of just great players coming out of the region.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, like you said, it is a basketball town. There's always basketball everywhere. You can always find guys hooping, and I think for me, like the community is very welcoming, especially if you play basketball. Like everyone knows you, everyone wants to say what's up. Everyone's cool with everyone. No one's too big, or even some of the pro guys who come back, they come around and everyone's always, super interactive with each other, always meeting new people and stuff like that. So like you said, I mean, the town loves basketball and they always want to be around basketball, always want to watch basketball and always want to talk about it. And for me, that's lovely because I love basketball as well. So it's super fun to be around, and it's always good vibes in the gym, just about anywhere you are in Seattle.
And one more regionality question, if you will. What's it like going back to Alaska? And because I covered a different team down here in the Bay Area for football, and there's an Alaskan on that team, and there's always like a different type of vibe when you go home. It's like, oh my God, these guys have, so to speak, are making a name for themselves outside of the region. What kind of like the vibe when you get to go home ever so often and say, hey, here's an Alaskan making a name for himself. I'm Brayden Maldonado. You're about to know my name.
Yeah, I mean, I think especially being from where I'm from in the city, it's not too many people who, make a name or really play college basketball or even a college sport in general. So for me, I always kind of took it as a challenge. Like, I'm gonna be one of the kids that people hear about, you know what I'm saying? People know about, oh, well, Brayden's at Seattle. I'm gonna go follow Seattle basketball now. You know what I mean? So
Right.
I think for me, it's super fun going back and getting all the love from everybody and all the young kids at the Boys and Girls Club that I used to go to and stuff like that. Like, they know who I am and they can look up to me, and I can try to help guide them and share my experience and share some of the knowledge I've learned. Because basketball can take you a bunch of places, and that's kind of just what I want to tell the kids. Like, it can get you out of Alaska, it can take you all around the world. So just don't be afraid to pick up a basketball, a soccer ball, a baseball, really anything. But just go all in at it, and you never know where it can take you. So I think going back to the city, talking to the kids, some of my old high school teachers, stuff like that, it's always fun, and I kind of carry it with pride.
As you should.
All right. As we start to wrap it up, we're going to do a quick some rapid fire questions at you just to kind of get to know you a little bit better. So first one is going to be, who's a player you model your game after most?
D'Angelo Russell.
All right. Favorite Seattle food?
I guess Seattle dog. Seattle dog.
Seattle dog. All right. Favorite late night snack?
Late night snack. I'll probably go like some Doritos, like some chips or something.
So are we going like the spicy nacho, or are we going like Cooler Ranch, or what's kind of like the Dorito direction?
I like the Cool Ranch. I like Cool Ranch. I'll go with Cool Ranch.
+1 on that one.
Yeah.
Best Seattle pro sports environment. So Seahawks, Mariners, Storm, Sounders, Kraken. Who's got the best environment?
I did go to a Seahawks preseason game, and it was basically sold out. So I would say the Seahawks.
Morning person or night owl?
Night owl.
And I'm the +1 on that one. I will stay awake until way too late and then pay for it in the morning. And then lastly, what do you do to relax?
I like to watch shows. I like to kind of just throw something on and just kind of relax in my bed, working out, lifting and stuff. You kind of just want to chill. So I like to watch shows, TV, stuff like that.
What do you have? What are you watching right now?
Currently, I'm finishing up Snowfall. I'm on like the last season of Snowfall, and then I was watching The Sopranos as well.
That'll do.
Really, yeah,
that's a good rotation.
Yeah.
All right. Well, thanks a lot, Brayden, for hopping on with us and talking some Seattle basketball. Exciting to have the Redhawks in the WCC, and we will. The season starts in just about 2 months, and Brayden. So again, thanks a lot for hopping on, and we will definitely catch you down the road.
Yes, sir. Thank you, guys. I really appreciate it.
All right, I want to thanks Brayden Maldonado one more time for hopping on and chatting with us. This Seattle team, again, he pointed it out. Coach Victor's talked about it, that this is going to be a defensive first team, and there aren't too many of those in the WCC. There's going to be a lot of teams, and we know that are kind of like offensive first, but there aren't too many teams that have like their personality is defense. So they're going to get down, they're going to get scrappy, but the Seattle team is going to be one of them.
I wholeheartedly agree. And I think for me, at least, when you know that defense and the way it travels, to me, that signifies a higher floor. I'm a big proponent of like being a floor guy versus a ceiling guy. So when you go on the road, you're at Seattle, it's like, it's going to be hard for a lot of teams, and vice versa. You're at home, you're having a bad shooting night on its own. You're not getting much respite having to go up against the Redhawk defense to combat that as well. So when you like ask kind of like San Diego, what's their floor, what's their ceiling? I think their range is a little bit smaller, but I do think it's better. At least for now, at least the way I look at it. Like, I think Seattle's floor is like 8th, and then I could give them like 5th or 6th as their ceiling. I think it's just a little bit more compact compared to your San Diego floor ceiling dynamic. And I just think in general that with the way Seattle plays, they can always bring themselves to be in the game. Now, whether they have enough offense to close out those games is another discussion. But in general, you play defense, you're going to be in games, at least for the bulk of them.
Yeah. So this is where I'm kind of I'm going to be a little bit bullish on Seattle because I think I have their range kind of similar where it's a little bit smaller, but I think it's 4 to 8. I think their ceiling is higher than I do have San Diego's. I do think that the Seattle squad, because the defense is an item that travels, that this is going to bode well for this team. Also, again, like kind of like thinking about just the number of guys that they have that are proven defensive stalwarts elsewhere. Brock Felder, Malik Arrington, Miles Amos. Like, this team has a lot of really good defenders on it. So I like the fact that they have that opportunity. The shooting you brought up is going to be the challenge. They only shot 41% from the field last year, which would have been second to last in the WCC. But a lot of the players from last year's squad are not on this year's squad. So I do think that there is at least like an opportunity for us to see that improve as we go in. Now, as far as like maybe realistic, maybe it's probably a little bit more middle of the pack. Maybe they finish 6th, like maybe they finish 7th. That's probably the more realistic option of what Seattle is going to be in year 1 in the WCC. But the one thing I'm looking at as far as a storyline when I think about Seattle is going to be that defense, because I think there's a chance that they could be the best defense in the WCC that is not in Moraga.
Okay. Okay. You had me.
After St. Mary's, this could be the best defensive team in the WCC. And that is going to be the storyline for me to watch, to see if indeed we see this defense travel, this is able to surpass the non-conference, get into conference play, and sustain through the year. The new league is going to be a challenge. But it's going to be both ways. None of the WCC teams are all that familiar with Seattle, so it's going to be a brand new experience for them as well, as they start to try to game plan and really get a feel for what this Redhawk team is going to be in the WCC.
I think there's just really just a lot to like about what Seattle can bring to the table, and that's not necessarily an agreed upon stance when you think of every single team in the WCC, and especially on its debut season. So I think Seattle, they're going to put their best foot forward on a consistent basis, which I think is going to serve them well. And I think, like we both mentioned, like, can the rest of it kind of catch up? And if it does, then I think it really changes the calculus for what year 1 Chris Victor in the WCC and his Redhawks squad could look like.